Welcome, everybody. We've got our crew back for the Star Wars CCG. What is this again? The State of the Market, Q2 2025. So we do this every quarter to figure out what's going on with the Star Wars CCG card market. This is intended to provide transparency so people know what are things selling for, what are people buying it for. All the data we reference is in the show notes. So if you're curious about Greg's spreadsheet, Mark and Luke's spreadsheet, Mark is actually calling in from overseas right now, so we might lose him at any moment due to his sketchy internet connection. So we're going to have Luke and Mark do the graded report first and then get into Greg's stuff. And then we have a little trivia game at the very end, which I think will be fun for everybody. We'll see how we do. It might just be me and Greg doing it. We'll see how me and Greg and maybe Mark do. What's up, guys? It's been 3 months. We're halfway through 2025. We made it. I read this thing today that we are closer officially today on July 1st to 2050 than we are to 2000. So that's a scary thing to say out loud. So
closer to the singularity than to our birth.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we will all just be Star Wars cards in an AI eventually. But I look forward to that day. So we're halfway into 2025, and it feels like the longest year of my life. But I'm curious if anyone here has any predictions or hot takes on kind of where things are at. I'll start and then maybe go to Luke and Greg and then Mark. But it feels like this is a really weird time for collecting. Like, people have money, but maybe not have money. And like in general, the market feels really odd. But I think it's kind of been picking up, particularly in like the May, June timeframe a little bit. And there's been this trickle of people kind of coming back again to the game, which I think has been kind of interesting to see. But I have no idea where things are going. But Luke, I'm curious if you have any thoughts or predictions or hot takes. What's your hottest take, Luke?
My hottest take is that this is the hottest summer of our lives, and every summer from now on will be hotter. How about that? That's my climate change take. No, I mean, I along with you, Matt, have noticed a lot over the last couple of months in terms of movement in the market and people putting on pretty valuable collectibles, including our own Mark, up for sale. And that spiked a lot of interest. The data we'll go through today is going to reflect that, at least on my and Mark's end for graded and sealed markets. But yeah, I don't know if I have a hot take other than expect volatility in what's going on, because I don't think things are being settled anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a little bit of expect the unexpected right now. It felt like April, everyone was like, the world's going to end. And then May, June, it's like, never mind. Everything's great. pump the markets.
Yeah.
Greg, what about you?
Yeah, I think volatility is a good call. So I think that's I'm going to stick with that. I don't have another hot take beyond that, but I think volatility does seem to be what's going on. We'll see the data. It's it's funky.
Yeah, like some really they're outliers, but they're also like understandable outliers. But it's like, oh yeah, someone spent $5,000 on one card. Oh, interesting. Mark, can you hear us? I wonder if this is the moment where we just lost him.
We've got a nice look at Mark's hair at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just jump right into our sealed and sort of the portion here that Mark and Luke are doing, and then we'll hop to Greg. Maybe Mark will rejoin us. But Luke, why don't you take it away with talking about sealed products? So this is unopened stuff. I'm curious to see what has been sold, what has been bought, where's demand at.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to take it away. Looks like Mark has joined us back, so hopefully that sticks with us as we go through this. So this data is valid as of the end of the month of June 30th. We're actually recording this July 2nd, but the entire month is encapsulated of June with this data, so pretty good like to like. Things just as a heads up, if you ever want to remember, okay, where are we seeing this? Where's this tracker we keep referring to? So tinyurl.com/SWCCG graded. You can just enter that in and that'll bring up the spreadsheet. I wanted to give a shout out that we have our first tag graded sales, which is a sort of technical way of grading. They do QR codes that tell you exact specific amounts of stuff, and there's all sorts of interesting stuff around that. So our first sales for that hit the tracker this last month, which has been pretty interesting as a new grading company to see on the market. All right, this is sealed market Q2 year over year. What you're looking at right now is the past 5 years of graded sales. So just Q2 though, right? And so we have the top line, which is the average sale price over the last 5 years, just Q2, and then the actual number of sales. And so let's start with that average price at the top. After a lower Q2 last year, 2024, we've definitely rebounded this year. In fact, we're right up to where kind of near where it was in 2021, right off the bubble of COVID and the really height of the collector's market, especially with Star Wars CCG. 2021 has a lot of huge sales in the database. And we're kind of holding steady in terms of the average number of sales, and if not a little bit down off of last year, but as you can see, the quality, or I guess the higher number of the sum of those sales means that the average sale price has jumped up. Although nothing's beating 2023 at the moment, with a lot of very, very high sales at that point. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Mark. He helped us with the sealed market by quarter since 2021. And so this is every single quarter, not year over year. This is quarter over quarter. So if you look at the total number of sealed sales in terms of dollars spent, I made that reference just a second ago to 2021. I mean, you can see how high that was, right? Right after COVID, I mean, we're spending $100,000+ a quarter on Star Wars CCG stuff as a community, very, very high. Then if you see the overall trend line, right, it's trending down, but this last quarter was quite a bit higher than it has been for a while. I think the last time we were this high was near the end of 2023. So I think this is a pretty interesting look, and I'm glad that Mark included it. Guys, any thoughts so far? Comments on just overall charts and trends?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one top line for me is it's so interesting. Why do we care about sealed boxes, right? What does that matter? I think it's a proxy for general interest in this community. People every quarter are spending over $50,000 on out of print boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Why, they're not opening it. There's obviously a commodity aspect to a little bit of this. So, I mean, I think it's interesting that we can look at the exact number. Look, almost $75,000 in sealed product sales this year. That's a big number. That's a lot of people buying sealed product, and a big push up from Q1, which was, that's always a sort of laggard, I find, because it's that glut after Christmas that everyone feels a little bit tired of spending money. But I'm curious if this line is going to just keep kind of going up, or see a little bit of a revival as people have money from whatever AI plays, crypto plays, Final Fantasy Magic plays, whatever it is. But I think this also tracks a little bit with the economy. As the economy goes up, people have more disposable income to spend on stuff. So, Luke, why don't we keep going here, unless anyone else has a hot take?
Cool. I'll keep at it. So yeah, I take a look at just quarter over quarter, and then again year over year. This is what you just saw, but just as actual numbers, you can kind of see. I tried to highlight this past quarter. So 170 sales, as you mentioned, $70,000 worth of sealed Star Wars CCG product. These are not packs, by the way, just sealed boxes. And for the most part, they're just booster boxes. Starter decks are included. Introductory 2-player game stuff is included, but things like official tournament sealed deck, that's not an included box as part of this. So in any case, you can see the average price, $413, almost $414. Huge growth in sales overall since last quarter. You can see it's over double the amount of total money spent on sealed boxes. So last quarter was $34,000. And then the average price year over year is quite a bit higher as well. You can see Q2 of last year, there was more sales, more sealed boxes were sold, but the average price was lower. So you'll see that reflect on the data that's coming up here in a second. We have some really high valued boxes sold this last quarter, which was very interesting as me as someone who's combining the data to see, because quarter one of this year was just a steady stream of like Premier Limited, Cloud City, like stuff that you see all the time. And this one was a pretty wide variety. So let's take a look and see kind of what happened here in terms of quarter two versus quarter one of this past year. So if you see the top there, that's 10% or more rise. So Jabba's Palace and Reflections were our big winners. We'll talk about Reflections more in a second, but that had a super, super strong quarter. A New Hope and Feed were down 10% or more. I guess I helped contribute to that because I bought a Feed box this last quarter. For the first time, after a couple of years of running the spreadsheet, I was like, yeah, it's time for me. I don't know what it was, but it's time for me to jump in and try to complete a little bit more of my own sealed collection for display. So yeah, anyways, I'm now a part of this data more so than I normally would be. And then plus or minus 10% is mostly everything else. You can see that a lot of sets aren't listed there. That is because there's just not enough sales either last quarter to this quarter. So let's take a look at that real quick, and then I'll ask for your thoughts on what's happening here. So what you're looking at is like the main sets that are being sold, right? I didn't include Reflections 3 on this list, but that'll come up here in a second. When I say main, like I say the most common. So Premier Limited always has a ton. Like that was mass produced. We know it. So you can see quarter two, that's that second column there, average 2025. It was $257 a box, and there was 14 total sales that made that average of 257. In quarter one, you can see there was 283 and there's 22 sales. That percentage change is about negative 9.4%, negative 10%, right? So that's like kind of a way to read this. A New Hope, 3 sales in comparison to 3 sales last quarter. So 16% down, which means like that's a pretty significant, apples to apples, 3 to 3 comparison. So New Hope was down a fair amount, although that was kind of our winner last quarter in terms of kind of unexpected jump. So I'm not really sure, given that there's only 3 data points, maybe there was a pretty high sale in that quarter one. I'm not going to focus on it too much other than to say Jabba's Palace. Take a look at quarter one. Again, this is what I mean by just really slow quarter one. We had 2 sales of Jabba's Palace and 11 in this last quarter. So 260 is our average. It's a little bit higher than the 225 quarter one previously. That means a jump of 15%. And then finally, I want to shout out Reflections, just the regular Reflections 1, jumped 38%. There was 9 sales of Reflections 1, and almost all of them, if not all of them, were over $1,000. And for a while, Reflections 1 was selling like 900 pretty consistently. There was even an 800 sale. There was a private sale there. And so we saw a huge increase in Reflections sales, not only like just the number. We had 4 sales last quarter versus 9 this one, but those sales prices were much higher. There's also a fair amount of Reflections 2 sales versus none at all in quarter one. So we saw some boxes that are kind of uncommon come on the market and be sold. So with that, guys, I'm curious your take on Jabba's Palace and Reflections. What happened there? Any other takeaways from the comparison here in terms of what's going on with the market?
Yeah, I'll start here. I guess my hot take is, why are people buying the worst boxes to open? Reflections is grim to open, right? Like the actual cards you can get, but I do think there's a nostalgia factor with Reflections. I don't know about Jabba's Palace. Jabba's Palace is also a brutal box to open. You open the box of Jabba's Palace, you're gonna get maybe $28 worth of cards out of it. But I think to me, this is just showing like a renewed, like this is like collectors coming back and saying like, hey, we want these products that maybe I've been thinking about buying. I mean, Premiere is a staple. People buy and sell it all the time, which still amazes me. Like, who are people, 14 boxes sold. That's like 1 every week for 14 weeks straight. Like the entire quarter, it's like someone bought and sold a box of Premiere. But Reflections is interesting because I think it's a little bit higher, more of a rare box, but it also appeals to like people of a generation, like people that stopped before the game got kind of wonky with like Reflections 2 and episode 1 and stuff. So this is super interesting. Greg, do you have any thoughts, or you look very pensive?
What's up with Dagobah? From no sales to 8 sales?
Yeah, just again weird. Here's really what happened with Dagobah, Greg. There's a seller that put 4 on the market all at one time, and so like they just basically were like, I found this half case of Dagobah. I guess I don't know. It was an eBay seller, and just kind of like, okay, cool. I'm just getting rid of this. So I think that was part of that.
I mean, what's interesting about this, I'd have to look at my spreadsheet, but if I remember correctly, I think Dagobah had a particularly good couple months in terms of sales volume set-wise as well, compared to how it normally does. And so it's weird how these things go, right? It could mean nothing, or for whatever reason, people got nostalgic about Dagobah. I don't know. But yeah, I think it had a lot more set sales for Dagobah than I normally do in a quarter.
Interesting. I would agree with Matt as well about reflections, like the nostalgia factor from reflections. I don't think people are buying this in general to open. Like you have that as like the ultra rares that you would go have, but like, I don't know. I think I bought a box of reflections, probably in Q1 actually, but like, yeah, I love that. You know, that definitely hits the main nostalgia. I've opened so many of those packs, like, yeah, it's interesting to see.
If you're thinking about buying a box of reflections to open, just a reminder, you can probably buy 12 of the ultra rares for the same price.
Yes. Yes.
Just a point of caution there. Statistically, you're going to lose if you open the box pretty badly.
That's right. Any other thoughts, guys, before I move on?
I think my internet's calmed down a bit. You guys, am I coming through loud and clear now?
Yep, you're good, Mark.
Mark.
All right, great. I got through the Jedi training, I guess. Now the internet's allowed to work. Yeah, that's right. The Jabba's Palace. I think it's interesting. Like, was that 11 boxes? That's crazy. I know you guys are debating that, but like as a theme, one of the things I loved about Star Wars CCG, I mean, I still love it, but I did also, is that the boxes are so thematic. So if you want something like, again, I don't know why you buy it over Cloud City necessarily at a higher price, but it's like one of those iconic zones, and maybe that is what's driving it. Because certainly, opening the packs, unless you really like naming every single alien that ever appeared on the screen, it's not really much of a appeal, apart from maybe Princess Leia Organa or Jabba the Hutt. So I don't know, just musings. Carry on.
All right, let's wrap up here, Luke.
Great. Last slide for me, I think, until we get to graded stuff. I just wanted to shout out like how strong Q3 was. So, or Q2, excuse me, was. So out of the top 15 sales of 2025 so far, 12 of them were in Q3 or Q2. So that means 3 were in Q1, right? So like we had a ton of really high value stuff sold. Let me just look up top there. It looks like the first 6 on the tracker, 5 or 6 were in Q2. So Reflections 3 box that sold for $4,000 basically. A couple Reflections 2, another Reflections 3, an executive gift set. Like these are all a Coruscant. I mean, feed lots of Death Star 2. In Q1, you didn't see any of that, right? We saw just really surface stuff. And so I don't know what it is about the market. If, we're trying to talk about overall trends, that people are letting go stuff that is quite valuable, and purchasing stuff that's quite valuable as well. That the Reflections 3 data point of 4,000 is, I think, one of the top 15. I think it was number 14 all-time highest sales that I have on the tracker. So like this is like 5 years worth of data and all pretty valid. That's probably one of the most expensive Star Wars CCG boxes ever sold for $4,000. And yeah, I mean, you can see, right? Like these boxes are worth a fair amount of money. And I just think that is interesting. Any last thoughts on this before we get to graded?
No, let's see if we can get Mark to do the graded stuff here if his connection holds
All
up.
right. I'm happy to chime in, Mark, if needed. Here is the graded sales report.
All right. Thanks for your support, guys. Looks like we got a little bit of misalignment there. I don't think that's due to the internet, but this is for a graph representing the total US dollars of the total graded sales in the market. And as you can see, there was quite a dip in Q1 of 2025, and now we're almost back to continuing I don't know what shape you'd call it, kind of like the upper end of oh gosh, that's too math heavy. Is that sigmoid? I don't know, some sort of a curve, right? Math class. Matt, look, you're a teacher. I don't know. You tell me what shape that is, but it almost looks like the top part of a curve right there.
That looks like an open jaw to me. That's what I would call that.
An open jaw. Okay, there's
an
the
airline, destination person. That's what I'll say.
So maybe we're going back to the overall greater curve trend, maybe Q1.
We might have just lost Mark. So
2024, maybe those were out.
All right, I'm going to move on.
Are you there, Luke?
Go ahead, Mark. We're going to go on to the next one if we can hear
yeah.
you here, to the number of graded sales.
Okay, great. Am I coming through loud and clear? At least for the
you
moment?
are now, yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Internet issues. Yeah, here's the number of graded sales instead of the number. Again, you see that rise over the past few years, and then a little bit of a downtick. Interestingly enough, as far as the absolute number, maybe not quite back to the trend, but it does seem maybe to be flattening out a little bit as opposed to diving down. Again, this all seems to be tied to the economy and people's willingness to part with their hard-earned money, putting it into cardboard. I don't know. It seems like it's been in vogue recently. I've been very impressed with the Final Fantasy modern product in terms of what people are willing to put out there. So I don't know, what's good for one universe might be good for all of them. That's at least the hope for on my end. If you get that, you might have already covered it, but I think that's fascinating. But of course, with Star Wars itself, we as a franchise, I say we, I think everyone viewing this video would identify as being a Star Wars fan, at least somewhat, have our own holiday. And of course, May the 4th is the big one. And this year, as we normally do, we break it down by the individual sales of the quarters. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that we have our sales data in Q4. And actually, we had some pretty high sales this quarter. All the way up to around $5,000 for the Imperial class Star Destroyer. That's a PSA 9 tournament foil, sold by someone who may be in this video, but no, it's owned by a person who will greatly treat it well in the community. So happy that it landed in a good place. But you can see as well, we have some other sales as well in the thousands. I believe that Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. Now, what was that again? I don't recall exactly. Luke, you might recall. I think you.
Yeah, it was 4,400 basically. It was a Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight PSA 10 foil from Reflections 2.
Mm-hmm. Right. I seem to recall that was causing quite a discussion in the Facebook groups when that happened, if I recall correctly. So also, I'm sure that to a good benefit. Corvettes or other Imperial class Star Destroyers are noted there as well. I don't recall the specifics of those ones. Do you recall those, Luke? The ones in April, the ICSDs?
Yeah, I think there was an April 1st sale, which is why it's on there. I don't remember the specific PSA number, but it might have been a PSA 7 or 8. I mean, honestly, any ICSD foil is going to sell for a lot of money. That graded, non-graded. Yeah.
Right.
So
and then as well.
Sorry, I think you're cutting
just
out.
One more. The Krelling Corvette on the right. That was a PSA 7 for that. Okay. All right. You take care. I've said my part. You guys take it from here.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Curses internet. Thanks so much, Mark. I think one thing just to say here, it's like interesting to me over the last having done, I don't know, like 12 of these now for the last 3 years every quarter. It's interesting there's been this emergence of like a very clear like tier 1 card. The Imperial class Star Destroyer is the most valuable card, hands down. Like there's no Darth Maul Young Apprentice foil, or it's just like this is the most valuable sought after card in like a tier of its own. And I think we just see more and more people trying to hunt this for the last card in their set. And this to me shows that they're also willing to put their wallet forward. And I'm willing to bet if you put one up for a buy it now for $3,000, it would probably sell very quickly, ungraded, right? And I think there's just a high demand for this very scarce card. So let's move over to Greg now and talk about sets a little bit, just to keep things flowing. And Greg, please, Dr. Greg. Do you want Dr. Greg or just Greg?
Dr. Professor, I thought is what we had decided.
Herr Professor, Greg.
Okay, we ready to go here? All right, so here's the news. It's good for the most part, with some caveats. The sum of the black border non-foil non-white, so non-white border non-foil sets is up a little bit. $4,500 for those sets, on average, is the highest it's ever been since I started tracking. It's a little bit above the 2024 average, which was the highest it's ever been, even higher than the 2021 and 2022 boom. In addition, Q2 of this year saw the largest sales volume of set sales since like 2022. It's not quite at 2021 numbers. I think I tracked like about 155 set sales this quarter, which again is the highest in like 3 years. And I think in 2021 at its peak, I think the average was around like 200. But otherwise, it's been a really stellar quarter. So the numbers look good on this end. Let me flag for you that special edition Tatooine and Coruscant had like particularly good quarters. Again, these things spike, they're wavy. I don't know if that means anything in particular, but those were the 3 sets that stood out to me this quarter. I don't have the details of the percentages they went up. One thing I did, here's like 2 things I want to share. One, I don't have a slide for, but I'll just note, while the sales volume of these sets was really strong, and while the numbers are also really good for these sets, foil sets have just not been selling at all. Like, I have not tracked any sales whatsoever for like Ref 2 foil, complete Ref 2 foil, complete Ref 3 foil. I think the days of the tournament foil sets are gone, just for a different reason, with the ICSD and Corvettes being so high. Ref 1 foil has sold a little bit, but generally the foil sets are just not selling. Maybe pause here for a second. I don't know if any of you have like a thought about this, but like the sales volume of the black border and even the white border sets is strong, and the foil sets are just not selling.
I think this goes back to the fact that there's just a lot of crappy foils. Like with Ref 2, Ref 1 in particular, there's just like, you want the ultra rares, which are, let's call it 5 times as scarce. And so it just leaves you with a lot of crap. Right, it leaves you with Skywalker's foil or whatever. Like all of these cards that like people.
Matt, those foils that I keep pulling when we do the pack openings.
Yeah, it's just like crap almost, right? And I think that like you see this more distinct divergence that's happening, where like people want the ultra rares, they want them to grade, they want them to play with or sit in a binder. And then they don't really want like 16 punishing 1 foils, right? And there's just like actually no market for everything that's not an ultra rare. And I think the math with like a lot of Reflections 2 stuff, I've seen some like pretty cheap Reflections 2 sets, and it's just like, why not? People just want the 4 ultra rares. They don't really want everything else, the other 96 cards. And I think that's become a little more distinct as there's more like data and information and people completed sets. And now they're like, oh, I want a foil Emperor, but I don't really want the foil other 96 cards. And Reflections 3 is a little bit different, because I think there's some more interesting foils in Reflections 3, but it's pretty grim for like 1 and 2. Like the playability, the interest level, the collectability of just like some of the stuff in there is pretty low.
Yeah, I'm sitting next to a Reflections 2 foil sheet, light side right there. And the Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight that just sold for $4,399 as a PSA 10. That's 1 out of the 111 possible cards, just light side, that you could get. I think we were talking a quarter or so ago about just the value of the ultra rares itself. And Greg usually goes through this, and we talk about just what are the ultra rares costing And I think we had this conversation about, if Reflections 1 as a set is this, you could take that and just sell the ultra rares and then have the rest, and it would be pretty, it almost be like a like for like the actual value of it. And so I wonder if people are now seeing, hey, putting together a Reflections 2 set and selling that's not worth my time or effort. I should really invest I'd be curious if that's going to come up with Greg here in a second. Like, do we see any movement with just the ultra rares themselves, the hardest cards to find? Is that what's going on here, as opposed to people trying to put together sets, or who's the buyer for a complete Reflections 2 set? If you're in the market, a lot of those cards are really easy to find, the very rare foils. And so the ultra rares, are going to be your main enticement there. So why not just bid on the ultra rare? I don't know. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, the other thing that I've never done this before, I was looking at the data the other day, and I don't know if this is the norm or whether this is just this last quarter, but I noticed that the range, that is the difference between like the lowest set sale averages and the highest, was like really significant. And so I put together this table here with just Premier through Theed black border, right? So on the left column, I've got the average sale price over the last quarter. Then I've got the highest set sale in the last quarter, the lowest set sale, and then just the column with the range. And if you look at just the average and then just the range, right? For a number of these sets, the range is actually like as much as or even more than the average, right? So like, A New Hope, the range is greater, the average is 133, the high was 233 and the low was 75, right? You look at Dagobah, it's averaging at 137, but there was a sale for 225 and as low as 55. Endor, we had a 560 sale and a 238 sale, right? This is just really bizarre to me. And no, I don't track sales of like heavily played or moderately played sets. So generally I'm just tracking, near mint, lightly played sets. So these differences are not because, the lows are like really beat up cards or anything like that. And so I just thought this was really fascinating. I don't know, here's something I don't know if you guys have thoughts, but also something for both buyers and sellers to think about. Like, these averages I'm giving you, they're averages. And, I have pretty large sample sizes for a lot of these, but keep in mind, you can get sets for pretty low sometimes, but also people are willing to pay pretty high prices sometimes. And, keep that in mind as you're selling and as you're buying.
Yeah, the range there is really interesting, because I think I'm wondering, like, usually when you see really high stuff, it's people that are excited, that are just doing the buy it now. It's like eBay newbies that aren't treasure hunting. They're just like, oh my god, I'm collecting this thing from my childhood again. Buy it now. I bought it. I bought a set. And I mean, obviously we don't have this information, but I'd be curious, like, how much of the highs are like the same buyer? Like, it's just a guy or gal that's really excited to be back into this, and that's great. But buying Endor for 560 is like insane to me.
Yeah. And I will say, like, you're right that generally buy it now auctions sell for higher than bidding auctions, right? That's true. But that does not perfectly correlate with the data you're seeing here. So some of these lows are like offers on buy it nows, right? That ended up, the seller ended up taking an offer much lower than their asking price. And some of these highs are, auctions that were bid up. But generally speaking, you're correct, but it's certainly not a perfect correlation. So anyway, this is really interesting. People can make of this what they want, but, people should just keep in mind that, when you see these averages, do remember these averages are averages.
I do wonder, I know we're sitting here in July right now, but thinking back to April, like mid-April, it truly did feel like the sky was falling for like 2 weeks there, kind of thing. Not to like have any broader commentary about the state of the world, but I'm wondering how many of these are from like panic sales, like the lows in April, where it's like, I need capital, right? Like, I need money. The Jabba's Palace, $45, go, right? And it's just like people really hungry for capital, as they thought that we were going to be locked out of like a global marketplace.
I did a cursory check of that, and that doesn't seem to be the explanation. It seems to be pretty kind of scattered throughout. So but this was not rigorous. I was just kind of glancing through.
Greg, this is just really quickly super interesting, and one of my trivia questions is about the range between two sealed products. So I noted this as well. I think this is really interesting that the highs and lows are so vastly different. So that'll come up later.
Cool. Yeah, exciting. All right, I'll go through the singles pretty quickly here. So the DS2 Ultra Rares are actually having a bit of a resurgence. They've had a really nice quarter. They're both, Luke is around 240, Emperor Palpatine's about 250. That's up about 20% and 25% on compared to compared to 2024 average prices, or Q1. I actually forgot what I was comparing them to. Oh, compared to 2024. I've got a note here. So they're up quite a bit. It's only 3 months, but I should say these are some of their highest averages ever. So, we'll check in next quarter to see how this is doing. But in terms, we have decent sample sizes for these ultra rares. And yeah, these are some of the highest averages they've had since I started tracking, 5 years ago. So that's interesting. The rest, the Reflections 1 foils, Luke is still sitting around 80. Vader's down a little bit, down to 150. He was a little bit higher in the previous quarter. The Reflections 2 Luke had a really good first quarter and now has stayed about static. In the second quarter, Palpatine's down a little bit. Vader is up a little bit. Matt, I always invoke you whenever Mara does anything, but Mara Jade's at the highest she's ever been. Wow. Although, as some of our watchers might know, like, she fluctuates a lot, because I feel like every quarter I'm like, Mara's really low, and the next quarter it's like, Mara's really high. So I don't really know what's up with her, but she's having a great quarter. Again, with the range, Luke, the Luke, there was a $385 sale and there was a $185 sale. So we had a $200 range on this Luke. And the EMP price, by the way, is really interesting, because if you notice, EMP foil averaging at 260 is only $10 difference from the non-foil EMP, which is at 250. This is the closest those two versions of the cards have been since I started tracking in 2019. In 2019, they were about $10 apart, and then the foils blew up. And so it's interesting that the non-foil EMP has really gone up and the foil EMP has gone down.
The ultra rares from DS2 have such an interesting, like, this is my own anecdotal evidence, but I had like 2 heavy play Lukes that I was like, oh, I'll unload these at like 160, see if anyone buys it. And people bought within like 2 minutes, right? Like, there is a huge demand for the playability of these cards. And even in like heavy play condition, like, these were like kind of beaten up cards. People were happy to have it for a deck because it's such a good card. And so I think that, like, the 2 ultra rares, like, there's this intersection of playability as well as collecting, right? They're iconic characters from the sets, as well as like very good for playing. So interesting data points there with the ultra rares, and they sell close to this even in like heavy play, moderate play condition.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Ref 3, by the way, data is not great in this last quarter, at least for the ultra rares. Qui-Gon is down. 3PO is down. They're still over 200, which is good. Even Darth Maul Young Apprentice is down around 650. He was over 700, even close to 800 for some time. There was a bunch of P59 sales, and they're up around 300. I will say both Darth Maul and P59 didn't have any sales for like 4 or 5 months, and then in the last couple months had like, a handful of sales each. So at least they're selling again. And the last one is the Coruscant and AI singles, or AI singles. Coruscant is down a bit. Theed is actually up a bit at 760. I will say, like, just randomly, I have like had 0 data points for Supreme Chancellor Valorum and the Phantom Menace from Coruscant, and R2 Brave Little Droid from Theed. I haven't had like any data points on those in like 5 or 6 or 7 months. It's not like shocking with R2 and Supreme Chancellor. It is kind of shocking with Phantom Menace, at least for me, because I feel like that's a pretty good looking card, and it's a card that I think is like a significantly better looking version than its non-AI counterpart. So it's a little odd to me that no one's buying that one. But anyway, that's the data.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking us through this. And by the way, folks, if you've made it to minute 39 of this video, all of this is available. Click the spreadsheet, browse it at like your own pace here, dive into the data a bit more. We are going to transition to our trivia game. This is my favorite part. I think we lost Mark, by the way, RIP. But I think it's just going to be me and Greg playing the trivia game. So I'm you guys can put in the comments what you think the answers to this game are. Obviously, you'll have it spoiled as we go through this, but I'm going to hand it over to Luke to lead us through this little trivia.
All right, guys, just like last time, 4 questions. I'm going to get pretty, fast, I think, just basic stuff. I'm going to open with a question about the Star Wars CCG boxes based on the spreadsheet. Person closest to the correct answer wins. So question number 1, this is the range question. Looks like we are kind of getting off here, but there's been 57 sales of Premier Introductory 2-player game sealed boxes in 2025 on the sheet. It's by far the most common box sold. What is the price difference, so the range, between the highest and lowest data points for a Premier Introductory 2-player game for 2025?
I'm going to say $56. This is a product that you get tricked into buying.
Yeah. I'm going to go with 45.
Greg. Wow, interesting. So I don't know if we're doing Prices Right style, but I'm going to say Matt is probably the winner on that because 56 is extremely close. So $64 versus 10. Right. So, the range that Greg was referring to here, if somebody, I include the titles on this too. They're not that different. One is an auction, one's a fixed price. Someone's just logging on to eBay saying, I have to have this thing that I played when I was younger. It has Vader and Luke, like the white border, versus somebody who's just biding their time and waiting for a low bid auction to come up.
Luke, quick question. That $35 shipping price, is that overseas? What is
$35 on top of. I didn't include that. Like, so shipping it is not included in our tracker. So because for a variety of reasons.
That is a criminal amount of shipping.
Yeah,
so much money for
Yeah, that's wild. This is for folks who check out my spreadsheet. I do include shipping costs, which it's an interesting question about whether to do this or not. And the reason I do it is sometimes shipping's included and sometimes it's extra, and sort of like to keep the data, like the decision I've made is to include shipping. It does make it tricky when it's overseas auctions, how to make those decisions. But anyway, that's if someone actually paid $100 for that.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on number 2. We'll keep it rolling here. We're gonna say that Matt won that one as being closest. What is the cheapest ever booster box, not 2-player game? So we're talking about booster box purchased according to the sheet. So just think in the time span of Star Wars CCG, this sheet goes back to like 2007. There's a few data points back there. What was the cheapest ever booster box sale? What was it for?
What box, or what was the price?
Both. I guess the price is more interesting, but yeah.
I'm going to say there was like a Jabba's Palace box for like $58 or something. Like just one of these really big print run sets.
Great. Yeah.
I would say that I'm guessing something in like the $10 to $20 range, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was something much better than Jabba's Palace. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
Okay, great. It's actually a purchase of mine, which I made in 2007 when I was in college. It's $12 for a box of Premier Unlimited. So Greg wins that one. We're going to go 1 for Matt, 1 for Greg. I bought 2. I was just like, for the hell of it, let me just put together a Premier Unlimited set. I didn't have it. And I was like, if they're literally, how much was shipping there? $7. Yeah. This is from Hills Wholesale Gaming. So I went back on my email, found the actual thing. It's on the sheet because I had this data point, but yeah, $12 for a box of Premier Unlimited. They're currently going for about $275. There's a sale today on. So yeah.
That was a good investment. That was like buying Apple.
If I kept it sealed, I opened them to try to make the sets. So.
And you probably paid $12 worth of cards.
Okay. That's right. All right, let's go on. Question number 3. We have a tie game here. Excluding, so not including the Japanese Hoth Reflections boxes, what is the most expensive booster box? So not like executive gift set or something like that. What's the most expensive booster box ever sold according to the tracker?
I want to say it's Reflections 3, but I
No,
think
you can't say Reflections. It's not Japanese Hoth or
I'm sorry,
any of
Reflections.
Reflections.
I think it's got to be Coruscant for like 2,800 or something. That'd be my guess.
Okay, Greg.
I would have said the same thing. So to say something different, I'll go with Death Star.
Okay, yeah. So interesting. One of our participants here is actually noted. This is Coruscant, and on the tracker you can see when there's private sales, people reach out to me. So yeah, it's actually $2,750. Beefred had a private sale of Coruscant. Matt actually had one last year around this time of a private sale. So Coruscant, yes, quite up there. Although Death Star 2 is not far behind, so that was a good one. All right, so 2-1. Last one here. Question number 4. Let's see here. From January 1st of 2021 to today-ish, 4.5 years, how many total dollars spent on all 3,128 Star Wars CCG boxes sold and documented on the tracker? How much money has the community spent in 4.5 years?
Is this a trivia question, or is this asking us how well we've been paying attention to your
No,
slide deck?
this has not been on. This has not been on. I guess if you had really wanted to add up all the things. No, I want you to just think about, like, yeah, in last 5-ish years, 4.5 years, how much has been spent in general?
I'm gonna say, I think it's like $500,000. It is like a lake house with the value.
Okay, great.
I would like to lodge a complaint that Matt has gone first on all 4 of these.
I can go first. I'm sorry.
You've already gone. No,
the host,
actually,
yeah.
I was actually thinking something around $500,000. So you know, I'll
$500,001.
Higher or lower, Greg? You can't have the same thing. Higher or lower than $500,000?
I'm gonna go higher.
Great, you are the
My
winner.
guess was actually a lake house.
1.25 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, way over $500,000 in the last 5 years. So we have an average sale price of about exactly $400 on those, again, 3,000 plus Star Wars CCG boxes. So it goes to show, right? We're recording this video, you know, it's 25 years after the product was released. There's still a significant amount of interest, which is why we're here. We're trying to provide that price transparency for you guys. And so that's my ending thing there. You guys tied 2-2 on the trivia for today.
Interesting. That's
nice job, dudes.
Luke, thanks for putting that together. I think for me, this just shows sort of like there is resilience in this game. There's resilience in the community. I mean, when we first did this video 2 years ago or something, I was like, who's going to want to watch this? And then suddenly, turns out thousands of people or hundreds. This is just like by far the most popular video I do every quarter. And it's interesting that there's such an interest from these collectors that are probably silent on the message board, silent on Facebook Marketplace. They just put in bids on eBay and enjoy their collecting in peace without being disturbed by, DM me for price or whatever. So hats off to the collectors and players of this game that we love. Any closing thoughts here, guys?
Another great video.
Yeah, we'll see what the next quarter holds for us as a whole.
I'm going to just say my hot take is I think things are heating up. I think that the collecting market, like the Magic Final Fantasy set, has got people thinking about collecting again. And we'll see where everything goes, or maybe people lose interest. And I don't know. But it's been a fun quarter. Thanks for hanging out, guys. And a big shout out, by the way, to Scott Church for his support of this channel, Category 1 Games. Check them out for all of your Dead CCG needs. Scott's just been great with supporting the community and everything. So please check his stuff out. There's a link in the video description as well. So thanks for hanging, and we'll catch you guys later.